All right, welcome into the show. This is Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. No matter where you are, how you're tuned in, as always, we appreciate you for making today's show a part of your day. Coming up, Eagles 53-man roster projection following minicamp. An updated look at this team and who, in my eyes, makes the 53-man roster. A great roster breakdown to see who's in line and on the roster bubble. Potential cuts. Obviously, some of the shoot-ins as well. Before we get started, help me out. Support me on social media. I'm on X at Chase_Senior, approaching 13,000 followers. And I'm on Instagram at Chase_Senior, approaching 30,000 followers. I put out a bunch of short-form content talking Eagles, NFL, NBA, all sports, lifestyle on my social media pages. So in addition to the long-form content you see here on YouTube, I also talk a lot of sports on the social media front as well, with plenty of Eagles content at Chase_Senior on both platforms. All right, let's get the show underway. Eagles updated roster projection, and we begin with the quarterback spot. We're going to continue to go chalk here, obviously, and I think Philadelphia's in a good spot at the QB position. I think Jalen Hurts has the possibility of returning back to that 2022 form. I think that Kellen Moore is really going to bring the best out of him as a player. Brian Johnson last year was in over his skis as a play caller who had never called plays at the NFL level with the team that was coming off a Super Bowl. His situational awareness was not good. And in the process, Hurts really struggled at the end of the year. But remember, as early as November or as late as November, he was the odds-on favorite to win NFL MVP. So it wasn't as bad as what some people were saying. 2 years ago, he accounted for 4 touchdowns and almost 400 yards in the Super Bowl. So I think that Jalen Hurts rebounds, and I like where the backups are at. Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee. In the spring, Pickett, McKee, they performed very well. They were very impressive. Kenny Pickett throwing balls down the seam, down the numbers. He really likes throwing that back shoulder ball. And then Tanner McKee has a lot of touch, accuracy, timing, and anticipation toward the sideline. Hurts did struggle with interceptions during OTAs and minicamp, but keep in mind, Eagles are trying to master a new offense. Let's flip the page to the running back position. I think Philadelphia only goes with 3, at least as of right now, on the opening 53. Saquon Barkley, your starter, Kenneth Gainwell, the backup, and then the rookie Will Shipley out of Clemson. Kind of a poor man's Christian McCaffrey with his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. And I think the Eagles carry 3 running backs because they are really deep elsewhere. And you can afford to go with 3 running backs so that you can stack up at other positions elsewhere on your roster. And Kendall Milton, the UDFA out of Georgia, an intriguing practice squad running back because anytime you get inside the 5, he's physical. He can lower the shoulder. He can break tackles. I think that he can be a quality short yardage back at the NFL level. If an injury happens, you can elevate him to the active roster. If you want to hold on to 4 running backs, I think he could make it ahead of Ty Davis Price and Lou Nichols. Next up, wide receivers. A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, one of the best wide receiver duos in the National Football League. After that, Parris Campbell pretty much got all of the wide receiver 3 snaps during mandatory minicamp. But with Campbell, Britton Covey, Ainias Smith, and Johnny Wilson, there are major question marks there beyond A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith because you think of those players. Parris Campbell's always hurt. Britton Covey has primarily been a punt returner. Then you have Ainias Smith and Johnny Wilson, who are both rookies, and they're late-round rookies too. And then you have a player like John Ross, who, like Parris Campbell, is fast, but always hurt. And right now, John Ross on the outside looking in to make this Eagles 53-man roster. He's going to have to stay healthy during training camp and in the preseason, and of course, produce as well. Tight ends. I think Philadelphia only goes with 3 because there are 3 worthy of making this roster. And again, because Howie Roseman has built up this football team so that there are a couple of players deep at a couple of different position groups, you got to trim away from one position to stack up at another one, kind of like the cornerback spot, right? So Dallas Goedert, Grant Calcaterra, and CJ Uzomah are my 3 tight ends. Goedert a shoo-in, Grant Calcaterra, really good in the spring. And then CJ Uzomah is that veteran who's been in the league for a little while, a good blocker, and you can just count on him. Albert Okwuegbunam has to have a good training camp. He's a super gifted athlete and pass catcher who at Mizzou put up great production with Drew Lock slinging him the rock. But at the NFL level, he struggled to stay healthy. He struggled to produce consistently. He's even struggled to just string together quality practices. He's not a good blocker. The athlete is there, and he's an intriguing athlete at that in catching the football, but he might have to do a little bit more during training camp to make this team. And then you go to the offensive line. Going into the offseason, I thought Philadelphia was a little bit light as far as depth, but I think that Howie Roseman has addressed some of the depth issues in the trenches on the offensive side of the rock here. Your starters left to right, Jordan Mailata at left tackle, Landon Dickerson left guard, Cam Jurgens at center, Tyler Steen at right guard, and Lane Johnson at right tackle. And then your backups. Mekhi Becton is going to be your swing tackle. He can also play both guard spots, as the Eagles have tried him out there in the spring. Trevor Keegan, you drafted him out of Michigan this past year. A big part of that offensive line that won the national championship and bulldozed opponents and was very physical. Matt Hennessy can play center and guard, so I like the positional versatility. Max Sharping is a player who the Eagles picked up a couple of weeks ago who has draft pedigree but hasn't necessarily put it all together, but he's played a lot in the playoffs as well. And then Fred Johnson is your backup left tackle. The interesting thing here as far as roster battles go, I am not ruling out Mekhi Becton starting at right guard over Tyler Steen. Does Mekhi Becton simply have too much potential to pass up on? And as he continues to get more familiar with that guard spot and playing it, because traditionally he's been a left tackle at the NFL level, does he make strides? Does he make progress so that he can actually start for this football team? Keep an eye on that as you look ahead to training camp as well. How would you grade this Eagles roster? Madden style. This week, EA Sports announcing that Christian McCaffrey is going to be on the cover. Well, the Eagles are going to have a loaded team in Madden 25. So how would you grade their roster 1 to 100? Let me know down in the comment section right now. We're going to go to the defensive side of the ball here in just a moment. But first, let me tell you about this deal thanks to our friends at Fanatics. Such a great deal. I had to buy this shirt. Brotherly Shove, the most underrated, most dominant, most efficient play in football, and it's peak Philadelphia. You have the X's and O's with Jalen Hurts going in for the touchdown or moving the chains on sale. Limited time only, just $22. Head to chatsports.com/brotherly shove. We'll put that link down below in the show notes and attached to the pinned comment of today's video. Let's talk some defense here. Defensive tackles, as it looks as though Vic Fangio going to roll with the 3-4 scheme. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, all safe bets to make the roster. Marlon Tuipulotu, I think he has the inside track at being one of those backup defensive tackles. And if Vic Fangio likes to implement that 3-4 and he does it often, you're going to kind of need that wide body nose tackle, an old school 3-4 nose to be on this team. It could be Marlon. All four of these players have a great opportunity. Jalen Carter showed flashes last year of dominance. He admitted at the end of the year he wore down. Jordan Davis has shown that he can play at the NFL level and be an impactful player at 6'6", 350 pounds. He admitted he wore down. Milton Williams, a great breakout candidate. And then Marlon is a player who the Eagles drafted. He struggled to stay healthy, but he's had some snaps where you're like, man, he can move some bodies in the trenches. Now to edge. Bryce Huff, Nolan Smith, Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, and Jalix Hunt making the team here. 5 edge rushers for Philadelphia, and there is some pressure on this position group. And you think about all those players, right? It's a combination of players having to make leaps, but also some players like Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham having to adapt to a new scheme. Bryce Huff, let's see you put together back-to-back double-digit sack seasons. Nolan Smith, sophomore campaign, it's time to break out. Jalix Hunt, freaky athlete, former safety at Cornell, goes to Houston Christian, turns into a good edge rusher. Vic Fangio really liked him. Does that translate to the NFL level? And like I said, BG Joshua, kind of a prototypical 4-3 end. Can you play in this defense, and can all those players get after the quarterback? Because if you can't, Sundays are going to be long if opposing quarterbacks have all day to throw. Inside linebacker. I had some trouble here, not going to lie. Devin White, best linebacker on this team, the most physically gifted linebacker the Eagles have had since Jeremiah Trotter. Nakobe Dean not getting reps with the ones as of right now. Instead, that's Zach Baun, but both are going to make this team. The Eagles traded up for Axeman Jr., Jeremiah Trotter Jr., and then that fifth linebacker spot came down to either Oren Burks or Ben Van Sumeren. And that battle for the last linebacker spot is going to be a good one in training camp because both Van Sumeren and Oren Burks might be liabilities as off-ball coverage linebackers. Both are good special teams players. So do the Eagles want to go with the player in Van Sumeren who made the team last year as a UDFA and was active on some game days, or Oren Burks, who's more of the veteran, who's been one of the better special teams linebackers in the NFL over the last couple of years with Green Bay and San Francisco. Cornerback, maybe the deepest position group on this team, and it's a really difficult one to really decipher. I have 7 cornerbacks making the 53-man roster. That is extremely rare because oftentimes you don't have 7 DBs who can make the team. But this year, Philadelphia has a lot of talent at that position. And that's great news for a defense that last year had one of the worst passing defenses in the secondary that we've ever seen. So Darius Slay, Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Isaiah Rodgers, Keely Ringo, Avonte Maddox, and Eli Ricks. Those are the 7 corners who I have making this club. Which brings me to this point. There is no spot for James Bradberry on this team. He was washed overnight last year, didn't show up to OTAs, came to mandatory minicamp, got hurt, but working off the heels of last year's disastrous campaign in which he was awful, I'm not keeping Bradberry over a younger player with potential that I can groom and develop. That's just how I operate as a football mind. I'm going to try to find a trade partner for James Bradberry. If I can't, I'll eat the money, I'll spread it out, and I'll just outright cut him. Safety, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, Sidney Brown, Mekhi Garner. The safety depth here is not great. That's why I've been pounding the table for Justin Simmons, because if you bring in Justin Simmons, you have him and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, and Sidney Brown as your backups. That's a deep and very talented and versatile safety room. Right now, the Eagles have been having C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship as the starting safety. Sidney Brown still recovering from that torn ACL that he suffered late in the year last year. We'll see if he's a PUP candidate to start the year. Then he doesn't account toward making the 53-man roster. That opens up a roster spot elsewhere, maybe for a James Bradberry, and Mekhi Garner, a backup and a special teams player. Love the addition of C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I think Reed Blankenship is a quality player. Both of them very versatile. Sidney Brown very physical. But again, Justin Simmons is the apple of my eye. And then, of course, specialists are people too. Jake Elliott, I think, is unseated Justin Tucker as the best kicker in the NFL. He's being paid like it too. Rick Lovato, a very good long snapper, and then Braden Mann stepping in for Aaron Sipos. That ended up being a good move for Philadelphia at the punter spot. We round out the show with this. As far as this segment goes, the Eagles are the blank best team in the NFL. Fill in the blank for me down in the comments section. This is Philadelphia Eagles Now.